Chris.
How you feeling, boys?
Fantastic.
Fired up?
Oh, I'm feeling wonderful. It's before we go, boys. Fuck, it's good to be back. Oh, Merry Crumbus, everyone.
Good evening and Merry Christmas to all the jousters out there. Welcome back for, it's not quite another year, not quite another season, but Liam, we thought it'd be best if we got together during this festive period and be festive together.
Well, we're, not particularly rich men. So we can't offer to buy each and every jouster a gift, so we figured that our present would be our presents, jousters. Our presents to you. And as disappointed as you would have been when you grew up and you opened it, it wasn't an action man instead. It was an action fella.
Action fella,
You're
action
now
guy.
getting an action guy.
Yeah.
You're now getting a cheap knockoff of the beauty of Christmas.
It's like the ad, the Action Man, the greatest hero of them all.
I wonder if Action Man was just an Australian thing. Because obviously in the States they've got, G.I. Joe. But never really saw you much. It was always Action Man.
Yeah, I think it was a G.I. Joe. It was like the Hungry Jack's Burger King sort of like, well, it's basically G.I. Joe. Yeah. But I don't think we have GIs in Australia, do we?
No, I don't think so. No.
So it has to be someone that is filled with action, filled with excitement.
And also he's a man.
And he's also a man.
Yeah. No action woman.
No.
No, we wouldn't want that.
No.
That couldn't be in charge.
No. Not in charge of action.
I'll see what happened when they put Maggie Thatcher in.
Too much action.
What happens when...
Sink it, she said.
That's what they always say, if women were in charge of the world, there'd be no wars. Maggie took over the Falklands.
Yes.
She sent the HMS Hermes and the power of the Royal Navy to a small island 8,000 miles away.
Well, that was... they had
to preserve British prestige.
To retake the islands. Of course.
I'll tell you what, the gall of the Argentinians thinking that they could fight the immense power of the British Navy.
Yes.
It's just the audacity.
There's a radio station from the Falklands that was live during when the Argentinians came in and basically said, stop talking, we're running the joint now. It's quite amazing. And there was one of the guys there, the British representative, like the governor. He had a house there. And
I believe there were 6 Royal Marines on the whole lot. That was the entire military presence, was 6 Royal Marines.
When the news got around to the islands that it was going to be taken over, there was a fellow that was like the driver for the governor, and he was there just like loading his shotgun. He's like, all right, sir, don't worry, we'll be ready. And I tell you what, that probably would have been all right for several hours, but I think they surrendered quite quickly.
Yeah, well, I don't know if the Argentinian conscripts were of a particularly high caliber. This is the great content, jousters, that you've missed.
Yes.
You've missed this for so many months.
Yeah.
And now it's back.
Specifically because this is meant to be a Christmas show. Not a
the
Falklands Wall show.
The English invented the modern concept of Christmas. Of course, there was that movie about Charles Dickens, the man who invented Christmas. So,
I'm not familiar.
See, it's all cycling back.
Yeah. What does Christmas look like for you, Liam? A festive Canadian fellow.
It looks like joy.
Yeah.
It looks like love. It looks like just...
family? Would you say family's involved?
Yeah, very family-oriented, our Christmas, which I quite like. We take a bit of both from the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern Hemisphere, of course.
The two hemispheres.
So Christmas Eve, we lean in very heavily, obviously, mum and wife being Canadian. We lean heavily into that.
Yes.
The big turkey.
Yeah.
The gravy, the mash.
Can you get a big turkey around Australia?
Oh, you can get a big old turkey. You just got to know the right people.
Yeah,
you got to know the right people.
Who's your turkey guy?
Don't know. I don't want to know his name. I don't want to know who's murdering my dinner.
Yeah.
But we do that. All the fixings. I make a wonderful pie.
Oh.
It's called a tortilla. It's a French-Canadian pie. It's
What's
pork and veal mince.
Uh-huh.
And it's mashed potato. But you mix the potato in with the meat.
Oh, I see.
So it's a meat and potato pie.
So instead of being like a cottage pie, which is on top, of course, or a shepherd's pie, where it's on top, it's mixed
it's all
in.
mixed together. Yeah, it's
Is it
fantastic. It's my grandmother's old recipe.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is done outside of this family as well. It's like this is it's
very
well known.
common amongst the French-speaking provinces in Canada. It's a very, very
see.
good pie. But of course, there's debate. Do you use beef? Do you use veal? Do you use pork? I go pork and veal.
No, of course.
It's a great combo.
Good mix. Like the bolognese mix, isn't it? No.
It is. A classic bolognese or a ragu.
Ragu.
I think, yeah.
Ah,
It's great.
yeah.
And then obviously we have the more traditional Australian Christmas Day. It's
Yes.
cold cuts. It's a big ham.
Beers at
Sister's
10
in charge
o'clock.
of the ham.
Beers early.
Oh, I haven't stopped from the night before.
Christmas Eve is a very festive time as well. I feel like Australia...
I read poetry on Christmas Eve.
Do you really?
There's a very sad Christmas poem because, again, coming from good Irish roots, everything has to have a tinge of sadness to it. It's called Christmas in the Workhouse. I read it every year, sitting by the tree, drinking Baileys, and we all weep It's very sad.
Imagine, yeah. Of course, Paul Kelly's Christmas song.
Yep. I will, actually, I've dedicated How to Make Gravy Day this year with Tim from Tamworth.
Yeah.
Tim's going to be coming along, got a roast lamb ready. I've got the recipe, just add, flour, salt, little red wine. Don't you dare forget that dollop of tomato sauce for
Sweetness and the
extra
tang.
And what's a Fagin Christmas look like?
Oh, well, it's all over the shop. We don't really know what's going on, you see. But I was wondering, Liam, did everyone have a bit of a ritual, talking about Christmas, about the night before, to the children, you see? There's always a bit of a tale that Santa's coming. There's going to be a man entering the house. He's not here to rob us, but he's doing the reverse robbing and to try to give us things.
And look, if you're a man going from house to house on a warm Christmas Eve in Australia, what do you want more than a cup of milk?
Exactly. A
stubby of VB.
Milk. It's hot here. It's hot. Boiling in this
Did you guys used to leave a beer out for Santa?
Well, it was never a beer. I think we left something out for Santa. But I also remember one year we left a carrot for the reindeer, of course, and then there was just a human-sized bite taken out of it.
See, ours was always a VB. Every year there was a little stubby of VB there.
Really?
You wake up, it's half drunk.
He's in a hurry.
He's in a hurry. He's a busy man. He's got a lot on.
Yeah,
give him a break. He's got a lot to do, jousters. My goodness.
He's busy. Look, I tell you what, the heavens have opened up us talking about Christmas. And
we decided to let it snow.
Because we don't get snow here. We get only something else, possibly hail. We'll be right back, Jousters, for the second, possibly third half of the joust, or we see whether it's hailing outside.
Christmas is a time for people with someone they love in their lives. When I was young and successful, I was greedy and foolish, and now I'm left with no one, wrinkled and alone.
Welcome back. Sorry for that brief little interlude, if you will, because the heavens just decided to rain down solid rocks of ice.
Yes, one hail. Jousters, we had one hail here. My God.
One absolute hail. Now, Liam, there's many reasons besides, terrible storms that I love Christmas. And me, I'm a bit of a filmsman.
You are a filmsman, yes. Naggy knows more about film than anyone I've ever met.
Well, more than you, and that's at least one other person. And that qualifies me as a filmsman.
Yeah, I just keep watching the same films over and over and over again, which we're about to discuss one that I don't think mathematics has reached a high enough number yet to adequately explain how many times I've watched this.
Yes, the film is Love Actually.
It's one of my top 5 movies of all time.
And Love Actually is a film that is very Christmassy, almost Christmassy to the point of being violently Christmassy, and it's very British. It's Richard Curtis. They've got all the star-studded bits and bobs in there. This is early 2000s,
2003, I think.
And of course, you've got Emma Thompson, the Colin Firth, and the Hugh Grants, and the Liam Neeson.
Look, if you're an English actor and you weren't in Love Actually, are you really an English actor?
Are you even trying at all?
You need a new bloody... Sorry, we've just flashed up the lady from Father Ted. Now,
of
course, one of Ireland's favourite actors, the lady from Father Ted, which is, I think, a much more accurate description of Christmas in the Northern Hemisphere.
It's not quite as polished, is it? No, it's a... it's not, in Love Actually, basically everyone's attractive, and in real life, very
Except
few
Bill
people
Nighy's
are.
agent.
But we've got the full cast.
Ugliest man alive.
We've got the full cast up there of Love Actually, and it goes off into about 7 or 8 sort of stories, these tangent stories, and they're all very. They're all they're all very loosely connected. I always sort of initially watched this movie and thought they were basically like non sequiturs, but they pop up and they make this attempt and to be like, oh, we're actually all one. And
now
we've got a graph up there about how connected all these characters are.
Just before we get into the connection of the characters, Naggy, have you ever heard of anyone referring to a sequitur? I never have. I hear non sequitur all the time.
Yeah.
So I know what a sequitur isn't.
Yes.
I've never actually heard anyone say this is a sequitur. And this is what a sequitur means.
Well,
there's a negative. There must be a positive.
I think sometimes we try very, very hard to create sequiturs, but we fail, and they become non sequiturs.
Well, that's because no one knows what it is. How can we do a thing that no one knows?
I don't know. We try our best. We certainly try our best. Now, Liam, I'll remind a lot of people, we thought we'd go through this film because it is an interesting movie that I think everyone has seen once,
and if
twice.
you haven't, I don't want you listening to our show.
Thrice they've seen it. They keep putting it on at Christmas time. I know my household does. But it's
director's cut, of course. You have to get the director's cut. Otherwise, there's so much rich rudeness that you miss out on.
Exactly, Liam. And it starts off it's sort of a funny place regarding sort of Christmas and love. It starts off at the airport.
Heathrow Airport specifically.
And of course, you've got Mr. Hugh Grant, who was everywhere in the early 2000s. And then he has a voiceover.
Including the back of his car with a certain lady of the night.
He certainly did, didn't he? He sort of was...
What an odd scandal that was.
It was. And then, because he was married or engaged to Liz Hurley at the time. And
then Warnie stole her.
Yeah, much
was
later.
Warnie pre-Hugh Grant?
No. He was much later. He got the later model of the earlier model. I don't know of Liz Hurley, whichever way's the older one. He got the much older one. But Hugh Grant was
picked her up off the scrap heap.
Was absolutely everywhere. And the movie starts, Liam, with a voiceover from Hugh Grant at Heathrow Airport, and it's not really his character from the film. It's just Hugh Grant sort of doing this voiceover where he says, "You know, when I ever feel lonely, I head off to Heathrow Airport at the arrivals gate." And it's like, well, why? Like, that's a terrible place to go if you feel lonely.
Especially in a post-9/11 world, which this film, of course, is.
Exactly. And like, an airport is a place of, a lot of anxiety. You can't find a place to park. Everyone's, rushing to get somewhere.
You've been you've been traveling for 35 hours. You get off.
You're tired. Yeah, you're jet
straight
lagged.
to the bar.
And so
that's what I love about airports now. It could be 7 a.m. You can go get a pint of beer. No one can say anything.
It's not really society,
it's a place
really,
of no judgment. Time is frozen. History doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Human relationships are distilled down into a 4-minute conversation with a person you'll never see again, but you're best friends.
And he says, because you see, this love actually is all around. It's like, no, look, come on. Yes, there's some hugs. And there's this footage of these people hugging at the arrivals gate. You think... And there's always like someone going, I wonder if this was staged. Yes, it was staged. It's a movie. It's an actual film. And so then he goes on, and this is what never really sits particularly well with me, because you watch this film every year, and then he goes, during when they hit the Twin Towers, and brings September 11th straight into it.
I say, it really ages the film, doesn't it?
Well,
launching straight into a 9/11 monologue.
It's like Twin Towers happened 20-something years ago. This movie's 20 years old. And then they just decide to bring up the Twin Towers every time you want to settle down for Christmas. And it's not really something that you want to think. But he goes, all the calls from the airplanes weren't from hatred or anger. They were from love. And
I would say that most of them are from fear.
It was, there definitely would have been someone picking up the phone going, oh my God! At least one person would have made that call, rather than saying, "Oh, by the way, I love you" and all this stuff. They would have just said, "Look, goodbye," and my life's about to end.
And you get Mark Wahlberg calling up his agent. I would have fought the terrorists.
He would have fought the terrorists.
I would have fought them.
He would have fought
that
the
plane
terrorists.
wouldn't have landed in the Pentagon if I was there.
Because if I wanted someone else on that plane, it wouldn't have been some sort of air marshal. It would have been Mark Wahlberg, just with his brute strength and his rapping skills. So yeah, he come out and say that, but then But that gets you in the sort of vibe for the film. This is sort of Hugh Grant. Love is actually all around, but we sort of jump straight into which I think is the strongest character of this movie is Billy Mack, which is played by Bill. I say Bill Nye. Some people say Bill Nye.
Well, Bill Nye, of course, as we all know, is the science man.
Bill Nye, the science
the
guy,
man from science.
Is there? But this is
Carl Sagan in a bow tie.
I never really saw Bill. I'm going to call him Bill Nye. Bill Nye before this movie, and then he's playing this sort of aging rocker that's in the studio, and he's trying to desperately record a cover of quite a well-known song, "Love Is All Around."
But of course, they replace love with Christmas.
Exactly right. And the wonderful shot of Bill Nye there, and singing a song.
I love that shirt. Where does a fella get a shirt like that, do you think, Naggy?
Oh, you have to be, that's vintage, you see. It's vintage.
I was at the op shop down in Wood Rising the other day, right next to that great bakery, ladies and gentlemen, where I got the part. That feels like the kind of place where I would find a shirt like that.
It's the only place
Great
that
shop.
That shirt still
If you
exists.
haven't been to the Wood Rising shopping centre, I'd highly recommend it. There's an IGA, second-hand shop, and a pie shop.
Bill Nye is quite good as Billy Mack, and
it's the role he was born to play. He was absolutely born to play. You raise an interesting point. This was around the time when Ozzy Osbourne was still a very important cultural touchstone.
Yes.
He kind of seems to take a lot from
a bit
the
dreary
Ozzy character.
Yeah, a bit of an old rocker. Can't really remember what happened yesterday. Where are my shoes? Kind of like a fun ex-drug addict.
Where are my shoes? But I forgot my socks.
Now, because this movie came in so much lovey-dovey, Richard Curtis reminds us all through Billy Mack that the Poms love to do a bit naughty language, but it's not. It's a bit of Billy sort of bum tit wank sort of swearing. You've got it there. Liam.
Now, because there's two lines in this film that I think are two of the greatest lines in film history, and this one, of course, is from Bill when he mucks up, and again in classic English style, it's expletive laden.
Yes,
but it sounds so quaint.
Fun, yeah.
Fuck, wank, bugger, shitting, ass, head, and hole.
It's wonderful.
But it's the way he says it, Naggy.
It's defeated, wasn't
He's defeated, and you just say, "Oh, I'm rooting for you, Bill.
Bill,
I'm rooting for you."
He's a character that really is the heart and soul of this movie, and it opens with him, but it doesn't really close with him. You don't really see a whole lot of him, but it's probably one of the more interesting character arcs in the film because there's some characters that have no arc whatsoever as far as any sort of development. We move on from that point to Colin Firth, because if you're going to have a British movie, you sort of have to put Colin Firth in there somewhere.
Well, if you've got Hugh Grant, you must have Colin Firth. And
exactly,
in reverse, if you have Colin Firth, you must have Hugh Grant. I think did Hugh Grant pop up in Kingsman, perhaps?
Oh, possibly.
The Secret Service?
Oh,
you can't have one without the other. It's like day. You can't have it without night.
He's certainly,
Black, you can't have without white.
He's certainly
Up,
around there.
Down.
Now,
they don't exist in a vacuum.
They don't exist in isolation. No,
yeah, that's it. Sorry, I'm sure they exist in a vacuum, but not in isolation.
Now, Colin Firth is. We catch him with his wife, right? And he has to go somewhere, but she's sick.
She's a hussy. Is what she is.
They're trying to establish how in love with that he is with her, but instead of him doing things that a husband would do, he just says.
Because remember, she's ill. A good husband would bring a packet of soothers, maybe
cup of tea,
cup of lemsip, cup of tea,
just to say, do you need anything else? I have to be off. But, of course, we've established our relationship that we love each other. Instead, because it's this quick fire shot, he just says, I love you 17 times. And I think that's how they think that British men express love, by just saying, I love you again and again and again.
Well, when you look at Colin Firth and how he interacts with women in most of his movies, he strikes you as the kind of guy, like, before he goes to bed, any red-blooded romantic male, you'd lean in, you'd put a kiss on the cheek, maybe a kiss on the lips if you're feeling a bit saucy.
Yeah.
He strikes me as the kind of guy who, before bed with his partner, they're each in individual single beds, he gives her a good firm handshake.
Eye contact.
Eye contact, handshake.
Good night, darling.
Good night, darling.
And then immediately falls asleep.
Yeah.
These
were the lovers that made Britain great.
We jump over to Liam Neeson, now, a fellow Liam of the...
You guys don't know this. I have a cousin named Neeson, and he was born about 5 years after me, so we are Liam and Neeson.
Oh, and together you are Liam and Neeson.
Yeah.
Right, but his name is not Liam Neeson.
No, nor is my name Liam Neeson.
No, of course. That's good. I'm glad we cleared that up. We don't want anyone thinking that you are, in fact, the actor Liam Neeson. But it sort of takes a bit of a turn down after this sort of lovey-dovey stuff. We find out that Liam Neeson's wife has just died.
It gets dark very quickly.
Which is even more sad now, because Liam Neeson's wife did pass away.
Which I didn't know until you mentioned that. Now I feel
skiing
terrible.
Accident.
Oh, God.
Yeah. But
that's what happened to Michael Schumacher. Remember, he had a skiing accident and was paralysed.
Is he still
Why does anyone ski?
Schumacher? Is he still alive?
No, skiing's only...
But he's not about to race cars, but is he still got a pulse or something? Not good. Okay.
The only people who should ski are the evil characters in like a 90s, film where they've got to race down the hill and someone gets a woman or something. And it's always the evil rich kid who's skiing. And the preppy and the peppy underdog. He's a snowboarder.
Yes, of course.
Like
I don't know what film
weed.
necessarily trope you're trying to draw from, but I can see it. I can see it in my mind.
It's a film trope in my head. I don't know if it exists.
The skier-verse snowboarder.
I've got a lot of movies in my head, Jousters, that no one knows about.
We jump over
They're all terrible.
Once we've established that Colin Firth loves his wife, we jump over to another Colin. I don't know his name is Colin, sorry. Colin in the movie.
Colin Frizzle.
He's the Frizzle. He's the sandwich man that does some sort of light catering,
He's a caterer. Yeah, he works he works for a catering company.
Insufferably horny. This whole every woman that he comes within a foot of, he sort of makes some passing remark.
He's the opposite of Colin Firth's character.
Yeah, well,
he doesn't want a firm handshake before bed.
No, he's just
he wants that firm hand somewhere else.
He's trying to root everything that he comes across, and it's very sort of like you immediately hate him, and you don't want any good fortune for him to come. However,
I don't know.
This movie,
he's an underdog.
Is he an underdog?
Any man that ugly It was so dedicated to trying to get a woman. I respect that. Well
Yes.
done.
Yeah. He's also just this, like, so everyone in this movie is quite charismatic, and he's not. I don't know. You could say, well, he's playing the part of a Pratt well. Yes, he is. But someone that we really love, I think everyone, Office fans of the UK, Martin Freeman, I believe is his name. Martin Freeman. He's there in the middle there. I think we've got a shot of him there. In
Played
case you
one of the
forgot.
Bagginses.
One of the Bagginses. Bilbo, I think he was. And he has a very interesting character because he dropped into this film. You're watching a film, and then he's in a film set, right? And what is he doing? Thrusting behind a woman,
Fully clothed.
fully clothed, thrusting.
Now, this is something we discussed, Naggy. So
Yes.
obviously, the film that he's a stand-in for
He's a
has
stand-in,
some sort
yeah.
of sexual overtones.
Yes,
But they're fairly high budget, so I don't think he's a stand-in in a pornography film. Because remember, in like the 80s and 90s, porn films had huge budgets, they had
Yes.
scripts, they had
of course.
music.
But this
they
is
had-
04. This
Yeah.
is almost the internet age of pornography. So I can't really reconcile the idea whether this is a pornography film that they've afforded stand-ins for the lighting and the shot setup, or if it's just a mainstream film with a lot of gratuitous
Well,
sex.
it's aired with an air of legitimacy when he refers to standing in for Brad Pitt on 7 Years in Tibet.
It does. So
Now, I've
it's-
never seen 7 Years in Tibet. Naggy, you've seen every film.
No, I don't think I've seen it. Either.
Oh,
But
Justice.
But this
you
film-
just saw history, a film that Naggy hasn't seen.
But Martin Freeman here is more like 7 years into bed. It's Christmas. It's Christmas. It's Christmas. It's Christmas. So I don't really know what's exactly happening with Martin Freeman and this other actress who's pops up. She's Stacey from Gavin and Stacey. All these people have gone on to do
Isn't that the
other
one that
things.
James Corden was on?
This is 7 years into
And
bed
that's
does
where,
exist, and
where
this is
everyone
Martin
learned
Freeman.
to.
Sorry,
Oh,
James
sorry, we
Corden.
saw-
Yes,
we
James
saw a
Corden.
humorous GIF pop up, Justice.
Yes,
You have to
yes.
forgive us. It was a very rude GIF.
Now, as we roll through, because this movie has a million characters, so to keep jumping from plot to plot, there's a man that I only know from The Walking Dead. Now, I haven't seen The Walking Dead, but he's on there. He's the main guy from The Walking Dead, and this is where sort of he cut his teeth, I guess. And this is the man here. We have a thing. He's
That was him at his worst.
well,
That is him carrying out the biggest dog act in the history of
and
dog
we will get
acts.
into it
Yeah.
because here we go. Walker.
Wanger?
Wanger. Well, anyway, okay, we'll get back to him. But like, so he's best man at his, of course, his friend's wedding, right? And
Again, Richard Curtis has to have a wedding.
has to have a wedding. We've had a funeral already. Oh, sorry, we've spoke about death. A funeral's coming up. So, but we have to have a wedding, and so because weddings are so joyous. Now, this guy is, he's obviously not telling everything to his best mate, including the fact that he's in love with Keira Knightley. She appears the 18-year-old that she was. She's
and still
incredibly
is.
young.
Look, she hasn't aged.
She hasn't aged
Aged
at all.
She's got kind of a weird underbite. Looks like she's been
She
sucking on a
always
lemon.
smiles with
Yeah.
the teeth of brother. But she's also marrying a man, the guy from 12 Years a Slave. She's marrying who lives
Is he the slave?
for 12 years, if you
Oh.
believe it or not. Is it not him? That's him? That's him.
Naggy, are we
Have I-
seeing
have
a
I-
bit?
have I
Are we seeing a
spoken
bit
out
of
of turn?
Sagi? Naggy, they don't all look the same, mate.
I thought it would made a terribly racist joke. I believe that is the same man. So she marries him, and the best man is not only the best man, but also it seems like he organised the entire wedding, and is also filming from the spot of best man, which is not typical. You know, you hire a wedding videographer, if
Yeah.
you will. You let them do it, and you stand and think. But he's there with a camcorder, which becomes a bit sort of interesting a bit later on.
Well, yeah, we'll come back to it in a bit, but he very much focuses his attention not on the man who he is the best man to,
No, quite frankly.
but in fact his paramour.
Yes, and also it does appear at this wedding that every guest there is actually a secret musician.
Which is really strange because, look, you've been to a wedding, you walk up and down the aisle, there's not much space. People are usually crammed in
yeah.
pretty tight.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden on the left, you've got 4 trumpeters popping up.
Yes.
You've got saxophonists on the right.
Yeah.
A trombone pops up. Half of the crowd apparently were carrying a huge brass and woodwind instruments.
Heavy brass.
How
and
do
some
you
woodwind.
not pick up on that?
Apparently, no one saw it. I don't think, are they guests or are they musicians?
Yeah.
No one really knows.
And then, when you have a wedding, you've got to kind of pare down the guest list. How do you think Arnie Fanny, who you haven't seen in 20 years, it feels like, we got a percussionist instead of you?
Yes, very sorry. I know you couldn't make it. But we brought the trombone.
I know you've been friends with the family for several decades, but we really needed an oboe. We had to have an oboe.
We needed some oomph. What do oboes give you? They give you a squeak, don't they?
Yeah, it's a high-pitched squeak.
Now, to round off the sort of introduction of characters, actually, there's still more to come because this movie is just a series of characters.
Yeah.
Hugh Grant, of course, we met him at the beginning through his voiceover, talking about how much he loves the airport. But now it appears that he's actually the Prime Minister of I was about to say New Zealand, of England. Right, so he's newly elected, but doing a bit of a Tony Blair.
Well, I like to think, Naggy, that the opening narration by Hugh Grant was him as Prime Minister trying to encourage people to travel to England.
Of course.
He's saying, what's the most magical place in the world? It's Heathrow Airport.
Yes.
Heathrow Airport, ladies and gentlemen.
That's the destination.
Yeah. But then you walk out of Heathrow Airport and you're just in boring, shit, dreary London.
Yes, of course.
I don't know why anyone goes to London.
No, it's cold a lot
grey.
of the time. Yeah. And Christmas freezing, you can't really
Jack
go
the
out.
Ripper was there.
Once upon a time he was.
I don't want to go to London. Keep away, London.
So
Get out of here.
Hugh Grant does a very, very much Hugh Grant introduction where he's just sort of like, I'm not really sure. And then
Charmingly bumbling.
Charmingly bumbling. You
Yeah.
don't really have any more charmingly bumbling men anymore.
And again, that's why he and Colin Firth play so well off each other.
They're both-
One's charming and bumbling, and one's bumbling and charming.
Oh, well. They're both a bit drab, really. So he meets...
Again, an excellent representation of the English.
To meet he goes through and meets the staff of 10 Downing Street, which is sort of the equivalent of the White House in England, and then he meets his council flat princess in his very own tea lady that he has.
I think 10 Downing Street as well is a really interesting kind of dichotomy with the White House. The Americans are very brash. They're over the top.
Yeah.
They have an enormous building dedicated to nothing but the president's bedroom.
Of course.
Hugh Grant's got a townhouse.
Townhouse, yeah. It
Just
looks
a
like
townhouse in South London.
Could be anywhere. Could be in Cooks Hill, really, the way it looks.
Could be.
Could be Newcastle's East End.
Yeah.
So he does the introductions. He meets this woman who, we quite clearly see that he's going to fall in love with eventually.
She's the help.
But she is the help.
And now that's a
like,
theme we're going to touch on throughout the movie.
also
This movie is purely based on inter-office romances
Yeah.
that are kind of forced upon these women who are employed by powerful men.
It's basically a film of men in an office doing work, occasionally being brought tea by a woman who they want to sleep with.
I watch this movie. There's no occasionally about how much tea is
They
brought to
constantly
these men.
bringing it in.
My
A flood of
God.
tea. They can't get enough of it, and that's why they fall in love with these women, you see.
Because of the tea. Just to think, England conquered the entire world doing
Yes.
nothing but searching for leaves to put in water.
Yes, that's all they wanted to
That's
do.
all they wanted.
That's all they wanted.
Imagine that.
We quickly jump back
See,
to...
now that's a lady who could bring you a good cup of tea.
And I tell you what, if that's...
Father Ted's secretary, and he never tried to sleep with her.
No, not to our
He's
knowledge.
a good,
anyway.
honest Catholic priest, Father Ted. Never would try to sleep with a middle-aged woman bringing tea.
But the sex begins, Liam, with Colin Firth's character who returns home to find that his brother is stooping his wife.
Well, he was not the one having the sex.
No, of course.
He was stooped upon.
He was stooped.
stooped upon. He had stooping foisted upon him
He was.
by his brother
He's
of
come
all
home
people.
slightly early, and his wife, the opportunist, a fair maker, if you will, has invited his very own brother
the
around.
opportunist hussy.
Hussy, and then says, he shouts out something basically saying, "I want you again before he gets home."
At least two times.
At least two times. This man
She calls him Big Boy.
She does call him Big Boy. Again, if it's so like
It's one of the least sexy things I've ever heard. Her hollering out to Big Boy about wanting him twice before idiot husband gets home.
And being a British film,
Well,
we
he
don't
was
see
made to wear the cuckold's horns.
the most probably interesting thing of this whole movie would be the interaction post that scene. We don't see any of it. He just goes, "Ooh," and then we don't see anything else.
Yeah, and he's so English. He went, "Ooh,
Ooh,
ooh,
ooh.
ooh, ooh."
They probably both just stood there and went, "Ooh, ooh," and then one of them left. Hopefully, it might have been Colin Firth, but it's. It goes on in this sort of fashion, Liam, and because we can't have so much sort of pump and pageantry.
Who is this man that we're
That's
seeing
Richard
in the
Curtis.
picture
We
on
can
the-
see
Oh,
that.
Richard Curtis.
We have this pomp and pageantry, and everything's fun, and there's a wedding, and there's musicians. Of course, we have to now. Richard Curtis, the man with a T, the T obsession.
He looks like the albino in the Da Vinci Code.
Yes, he does.
Starring
Odd-looking
Thomas
man.
Hank.
Very close together eyes. He loves to throw in a funeral. Of course, he has the movie 4 Weddings and a Funeral, which is the perfect offset. But this
Another classic of cinema that I haven't seen.
this movie is 1 wedding, 1 funeral, all in the space of 9 minutes.
Heaps of rooting.
It's a lot of it. It's a lot of rooting.
It's called 1 Wedding, 1 Funeral, and dozens of inter-office relationships.
So we get Liam Neeson's eulogy about his dead wife, which is a bit sad. And they've got a son, which is fine, but it's sort of like, this adds a sort of an element. And they play the Bay City Rollers, Bye Bye Baby Bye Bye, which is sort of a bit, it's quite jarringly fun. You can't really help but toe tap to the whole thing.
And that's how I'd want my funeral to be.
Yeah.
It's having a good time. It's having a sing. Everyone gather around the coffin, have a giggle.
How much sort of bobbing can you
Pull
do in
someone's pants down without them knowing so you can all...
a funeral dacking? I don't know.
If you could dack the priest, that'd be my dream funeral.
Oh.
Someone dacking the priest.
I'll note that for later.
Please do.
Assuming that I outlive you, and you have a Catholic funeral apparently. So it's a bit sad, Liam Neeson. You feel for him. He does a sort of a sad man quite well through this movie. But I think I believe the final character that you get introduced to is Alan Rickman's, which is just sort of the office boss. Now he has a secretary in this movie that is quickly introduced and is equally as horny as the sandwich man, Colin.
Even more so, I would say.
Yeah, and
Because
he-
she's more sultry about it. He's just an ugly idiot.
And he just sort of
She's a
tolerates.
sultry European.
Yeah, and he just sort of tolerates her sort of aggressive flirting, but then invites Laura Linney into the office, with whom he manages, and basically tells her, we know you've been in love with Carl, I think is
Carl.
the architect or something that works at the firm.
Well, that's the thing as well. And this happens so much in especially Christmas movies.
Yeah.
The dad or the husband just works at business.
Business, yeah.
So what does he do?
Office.
He works at office.
Yes.
And they're always trying to be made partner. He's like, I'm so close to being made partner. And the wife, they have to make you partner. Partners in what?
But yeah.
What are these businesses
What do
these
they
men
do?
work at?
No one knows.
Just
No.
miscellaneous business.
Absolutely, no one
But I
knows.
think, and we'll come back to this when they have their interlude with Carl
Carl.
and Laura Linney. But
Yeah.
there's a really funny American kind of teen movie trope that they lean into that we'll come back to in a bit.
It's so we ended with Alan Rickman basically encouraging Laura Linney, who's American in this film, it says, hey, you like this guy Carl? Why don't you just go and have sex with him and start an inter-office relationship despite being the manager of that? And
He
that's
didn't
something
even
we'd want
bother to
to
call
avoid.
in HR.
No,
They would have had
HR.
a field day
He
in this
sits it
movie.
down and says, go and hit on him, basically. Interesting approach for a manager, but it probably speaks a little bit more about his management style. We're going to have a halftime break, and we'll be right back for the rest of Love Actually.
If you believe in Father Christmas, children, like your Uncle Billy does, buy my festering turd of a record.
Welcome back to the second half of the very jousty Christmas, Liam, where we're discussing the film Love Actually.
You could, in fact, call this episode Love Joustily. Love Joustily.
Possibly.
But you wouldn't call it that because that's terrible. I apologise.
After introducing the, cornucopia of characters, we're back to...
Sorry, the cornucopia of actors. No one actually knows the
characters' names. Billy Mack's probably the only
Yeah.
one, because it's mentioned a few times, but everyone else is just the actor's
Yeah.
name.
It's all bells, no whistles.
But
Except it also has whistles. I love this
We're
movie.
back to Bill Nye's character, Billy Mack, who's doing a radio interview trying to promote his song. And again, I think this is, very good. It's a very sort of believable sort of ex-rocker that's struggling with the modern day, if you will.
And his recovery from, substance abuse. And you can tell when he's getting interviewed, it's like, I'm glad I don't do heroin anymore, but it was way more fun and I miss it.
And he's talking about, because he's like, you don't have a family at home, Billy? He's like, not me, Michael. It's very sort of self-deprecating, which I think is really the strength of this movie, is when they're sort of attacking themselves.
Well, that's why, it works so well for, British characters and British actors, because we'd like to attack them, and it's even funny when they attack themselves.
He has the best line in this movie, I think. I got the biggest laugh when I was watching it in the cinema back 20 years ago. And I refer to it as the cinema rather than the movies because I'm a prat.
There was a one-screen cinema out in Port Stephens. Was that your local?
Yes, Nelson Bay Twin Cinema, even though there
it was twin.
3 of them. But the name didn't change.
I think I might have seen Lord of the Rings there.
You poor soul.
No, sorry, that was Raymond Terrace. We went there because the tickets were cheap, and my dad's good at finding bargains.
Well, you may as well watch it on anyone's television because basically it was the same amount of visual and audio enjoyment.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
But they said, oh, why don't you tell it? He goes, I'm going to be honest with you, Michael. And he says, oh, best shag you've ever had. And he says, Britney Spears. And then he says, nah, she was rubbish. Yeah. And at the time, I think Britney Spears was, again, about 18 years old. So it was very funny that this old man was talking about
aging ex-heroin addict. I think he describes
yes,
himself as later in the movie.
Yeah, and he also says about his manager, ugliest man in the world, which is just wonderful to refer to anyone as.
That's a great moment I'd love to touch on later on because it's a beautiful, beautiful moment between two hetero males. Just want to give each other a hand job.
Yes, exactly right.
Christmas hand job.
We go back to Hugh Grant, Liam, and he's sort of muttering his way through a press conference at this point because apparently, the Prime Minister has to do prime ministerial duties through this movie. Which that's the hard-hitting side that you might not see in some other rom-coms. The Prime Minister actually has a job to do, and it is
ladies
plot.
and gentlemen.
A lot of what he goes on is plot. So there's like the American president is going to be arriving, which is, I think, for a British sort of political sort of vision, is the biggest thing that could possibly happen. Is that the American president is soon to be arriving, even though they've been great friends for about 80 years.
Well, you've seen what Australian people are like. If a president says Australia, we throw a public holiday.
Yes.
Like if Joe Biden says there's Australia on a map, it'd be, it'd rival the America's Cup win in 1982. Albo would get on TV, it's like, take a month off.
Now, this president, Liam, you'll have to see, it's played by Billy Bob Thornton, who I think we've got a shot of.
Now, you made a point earlier for, jousters that have seen this film. Billy Bob is a very kind of aggressively misogynist, sexual predator.
A southern misogynist predator. He's not said whether he's Republican or Democrat, but he does also give that sort of wink, is this Bill Clinton that they're trying to do?
You mentioned that earlier, Naggy, and I would like to rebut. Yeah. Bill Clinton, one of the reasons he was so successful at carrying out sexual assault is because he wasn't disarming. He was very folksy, he was
charming.
He was charming.
Yeah.
I would argue that Billy Bob's fella is just
straight down the barrel.
I'm a rapist. I've got a laser vision.
Yes. Well, I think they were trying to incorporate the Bill Clinton-esque. I'm going to assault a staffer.
Yeah.
Mixed in with because what's it the tea lady that's the love interest for Hugh Grant is very Natalie is very sort of Monica Lewinsky-ish. Like as
she
far
does
as
look like Monica, doesn't she? With the long dark hair.
There's definitely some. Yeah. This is definitely not Monica Lewinsky. But again, if they had this tea lady there, there would be fewer sexual assaults against her.
I don't know.
Now that's not victim blaming. I would say. That's the Merry Christmas victim blaming from the Joust. But there's Natalie down there, Monica Natalie Lewinsky. But he also comes across because it was the time of George Bush Jr. George W, not to be confused with George H.W, because apparently all those people in their family have the exact same name.
That's how rich people are. They're not very creative, Naggy.
No, they just have the same name.
That's what Irish people are as well. My mum and none of her sisters, they don't go by their first name.
No.
Because there's like 3 names in Ireland and you have to name them that.
Yes.
So the first daughter gets named Mary because all the grandmothers are Mary. Second daughter gets named like Mari because all the second grandmothers. There's this whole pecking order of people with the same name for generations.
It's it's because it's all like Mary's like Mary, and then there's like
there's all Patrick's.
Arabic thing of Mary is like Mariamne, which is like Miriam, and then
you got Maria,
all the same. It's all basically from the Bible.
It's all the same book.
And it's all the same one.
Let's talk religion. Come on, let's really dig
one
into
book. And then decides to name all their children after it forever. So we also get some more gratuitous sort of sex scenes from this apparently mainstream movie with Martin Freeman.
That's one thing we should have mentioned at the top of the show, Naggy, is that if you are going to watch Love Actually as kind of a watch-along video with us chatting away, get the director's cut.
More sex scenes?
And, well, you don't see the breasts in the PG version.
No, of course. We're not saying the PG version. We're saying, the televised version probably doesn't show you.
I don't think it did. I was really disappointed.
No, but any other, like, I think the Netflix one will show you all of it. But here's one of the scenes that... Could you see a mainstream movie where this is actually happening? I
believe that's a takeoff scene of The Hobbit.
I know.
That's Arwen, Queen of the Elves down there. Not the one played... That's the Kate Blanchett elf.
Oh, God. Bilbo bags her, maybe, as 2 from 2. Liam Neeson is still upset, right? Because now he's not just upset about his dead wife who died all of about 12 hours ago.
Well, that's the thing. The film takes place over a very short period. He maybe he mourns differently to the rest of us. Everyone's entitled to express your grief in your own way.
Yes.
But he did rebound pretty quick.
He rebounded pretty quickly as far as his emotions, but now he's really worried about his son. But we find out it's not his son, it's his stepson, which adds nothing to the plot.
Well, I disagree, Naggy. I think it adds a lot to the plot because the age of the stepson, the comfortability of him with the stepfather, of course, Liam Neeson, indicates that maybe the father went out of the picture very early and Liam Neeson came into the picture early.
Dead as well, maybe.
Is this boy an orphan?
Well, you'd think he's an orphan now
orphan.
because even if you had a terrible relationship with your father, you think the stepfather wouldn't be in a. Apparently, he doesn't know the son at all. Really, he's just guessing, and he said, so he decides to confront the son and says, basically, look, I know your mother died 10 minutes ago, but why are you so sad all the time? And his son takes a surprising turn.
I think it's what could be worse than the something pain of being in love.
Yeah, of course, that's what he says. He goes, "Oh, what
everlasting agony, perhaps."
He says, "Oh, by the way, He goes, "I'm not really sad about Mum anymore, because that was a moment ago.
Yeah.
We're still cleaning the floor from the funeral. However, I'm upset because I like this girl at school, despite being about 8 years old."
And he says, I'm in love and there's nothing you can do about it.
Which is very sort of,
strong. Kind of myopic, but it's a strong line.
He meets with his son on a bench by the river.
The Thames. The wonderful brown, delicious smelling Thames.
Not a soul around.
No.
These two have complete autonomy over this particular spot where he confesses his love for this other student. There we have a photo of it there. And mind you, there's a person in the background when I said there's not a soul around.
You've disproved your own point, Naggy.
Yes. But so this becomes now Liam's sort of quest. I must fix this problem that I don't know the girl that my son likes, but they must get together, and I'm going to give him all of my sort of. I'm now a bachelor because they're
going to go through the experience together, perhaps.
Yes, we're batching together.
Just living the swinging singles life with his 10-year-old stepson.
And he obviously clearly Liam Neeson hasn't been sort of a single man for quite so many years, but he's just going. I'm going to bestow all my knowledge of being single onto you. Which, so that sets up a nice bit of plot there, of course.
There's lots of plot.
The whole movie's plot.
It's all plot.
Characters don't move an inch. Can I say that?
Could have filmed it inside the local Waitrose,
but
we've been fancy shops in London by the Thames.
We've been wondering, Liam, what happened to Colin Firth's character because he obviously found out that his wife was having an affair. Then he disappears after making the sound.
Which I think is a good way to do it. Just disappear for a bit. Well, you've got continental Europe right on your doorstep.
Yeah. Well,
go get some young Portuguese strumpet.
Exactly what he does, Liam. He goes to France, I believe, is the country that.
Yeah.
But then he goes there because he's a writer, Liam. So he must focus on his work. He's thrown himself into his work, and he's got this house that I'm assuming he's renting out there, and he's like, "Oh, I must write my book."
Seems like a lot of English people just own houses in the south of France.
Well,
so maybe he owns it.
Possibly he owns. Well, he has a very nice apartment in London. So he sort of dusts it all off, and then immediately he's just given a housekeeper. I don't know how the French economy works, but apparently over there they'll be like, "Well, you're here now, therefore you must have a housekeeper."
Here's a broom.
Yeah.
Because when you stamp the passport, you go, "Here's your passport. You're from Eastern Europe. Have a broom."
Yes, you must be cleaning. You must be cleaning for the folks that can speak English. And so he's given this Portuguese woman as a housekeeper, despite being the only person in the house, and who's decided to write, which doesn't take a lot of movement around the house. He's just sitting and writing on a typewriter.
And as we discussed, being a depressed failed novelist. I was one of them once. I wasn't eating much.
No. 3
bottles of Gossip's bloody Shiraz fills your belly pretty easily.
If he put on a teapot, he basically doesn't need her because all she does is bring him tea and light meals.
Well, he's got the whole of IKEA there in the bloody kitchen cabinets, given how many mugs she's constantly switching out.
Well,
every scene with the two of them, she's just picking a mug up and putting a mug down.
Mug. How many mugs do you need?
Again, these English people conquered the world.
Also,
For mugs.
She like I don't want to put
Conquered,
anything
sorry,
on
not
this. On this,
conquered.
I don't want to put another mug. I don't want to put anything on this Portuguese woman. But you would think when you place a mug down and there was an empty mug there, you would remove the empty mug because really, if you're housekeeping, if you will, and house serving, you would place one, remove one, unless he's got different drinks in all the mugs.
Richard Curtis is racist against Portuguese.
Do you think coffee's
He thinks
in one,
they're all dumb.
tea in the other?
Richard Curtis, you're terrible. Well, what's the point then? You're having a tea, which is going to calm you down. Then you're
Yeah.
having a coffee, which is going to stimulate you.
Yes, and a glass.
the point?
There's a glass there as well. And a bowl. Take away the stuff. She's not a very.
I want to know more about that croissant. That looks good.
It does look alright.
I hope it's got some ham and cheese in it. You ever have a ham and cheese croissant?
So it's
It is the best brunch you could ever have.
as long as they don't toast it and flatten it.
That would be a waste of a good croissant.
Well, that's how they do it.
Why would you
sometimes.
flatten it?
I don't
It's all
know.
the air in there that
I
makes it
don't
beautiful.
know. But if they air fry it, it's good. It keeps it crusty,
Yeah.
crusty and vibrant. But she's Portuguese. They can't speak. She can't speak a lick of English, and he can't speak a lick of Portuguese. So they're just there communicating with nods. I
And now
suppose.
this obviously takes place in 2003, albeit in the past. It was still a
Yes.
relatively modern era. Now, I respect his dedication to the craft of writing by using a typewriter.
Yeah.
But surely there's a computer somewhere in that house that has access to Google Translate or whatever they had
Something,
back
yeah.
in those times. It can't be it. Maybe Encarta Encyclopedia had like a language conversion
At
chart.
least a book of phrases. You know
phrase
what I
book.
mean?
That's
Yeah.
what I was. Not a word chart, a phrase book.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Like the technology existed then as it does now.
now we have the fires being burning, right, for these men who are working and these tea women who are distracting them with sex. It goes straight back to David, Hugh Grant's character, who immediately is at work again and has been...
He's
you
a
know,
busy man. He's Prime Damn Minister.
and being Prime Minister, you're thirsty for bloody tea.
You've got to always have one eye on the Falklands. You can be, looking at a white paper from the Department of Defense. If your left eye strays from the Falklands, it's done.
It's done.
It's over.
The whole they will invade again. The Argentinians
The
love
RGs are coming again.
They're waiting for it. So we're building this character again with a woman that's bringing a man who's in the office some tea. I think the
It really is an exercise in like gender power dynamics.
it is well, yes. I think Natalie is someone that probably would remove the empty teas as part of her role because
And of
it's
course,
10 Downing
remember,
Street.
she brings him the
She's
fancy biscuits with the chocolate on.
Of course, yeah. She tries to sweeten him, if you will. Pardon the pun.
So maybe it's going both ways. It's reciprocated.
I wonder if instead of a croissant, the Portuguese lady can bring a Portuguese tart.
Ooh, that'd be
Yeah.
nice. What are they made out of? Pears?
Mm.
Is it a pear tart?
I'm not sure what to put. No, it's custard. I think it's custard.
Oh, I love custard. I used to get a family-sized custard tart from Woolies sometimes, and I would just go to town on that thing.
And
It's amazing.
It becomes apparent quickly by the man who that we go back to the Walking Dead guy over a phone call with his friend, his best friend ever, post wedding. His friend says, "Oh, can you give us some of the footage that you've been filming that whole time? Instead of posing for photos, you were there, fancying about a camcorder. Can you give us some of the footage?" And he was like, "Oh, I don't really want to." And then he's like, "I know you don't like my wife." And just this comes out now.
That's called dramatic irony now.
Well, it's like, I know you don't
Very
like her, but
Shakespearean.
she might
Shakespeare
come.
used a lot of dramatic
She
irony.
might come around and try to get this film off you because I don't know. It's her wedding.
And then the second he hangs up, she's there. That was planned. He was
I-
like, all right, I'm going to call him.
Yes.
I'm going to convince him to let you in the door. The second he hangs up, you pounce.
boom, she's there,
Pounce.
ready for it.
And you'll notice, Naggy and Joust, as if you zoom in on the room where he's keeping these VHS tapes that he said that he taped over.
Yes.
There's a copy of Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Mirror on the shelf.
Rear window.
Rear window.
Yeah,
So I was thinking cars. Yeah. Alfred Hitchcock, rear
view
window.
mirror.
And for
Through
those
the
that
window.
don't know, Jousters,
Yes.
Naggy, tell us what happens in that movie.
That's with a man that's watching someone else with a big camera. Oh,
Parallels.
here we go.
Yeah.
Allegories out the wazoo. We get the American president also joining us. We'll touch back quickly on the when Keira Knightley comes and I've just gone around in a complete circle. Keira Knightley comes and then she gives him some sort of pastry. Again, the woman
A banoffee pie.
subservient
Banoffee pie, yeah.
to the man to be like, I want something, please. And then
It's
he's
the whole movie is men receiving sustenance from women.
yeah, and trying to sleep with them in return. And he comes out and says, "No, I don't have anything." She says, "Is this the video?" He says, "Well, it is. I haven't hidden it at all." And then she puts it in, and then the whole thing is filmed of her. And then at at that moment, she realizes that, hang on a second, you're actually in love with me. You don't hate me at all. It's a hate-love relationship. One of those classic things.
The oldest trick in the rom-com book, the hate-love.
And the way that he deals with that is to leave his own apartment with Keira Knightley still inside. Not something
and he didn't even leave a key and say, here, put this under the mat or whatever. He just leaves. But I'm a man of passionate feelings, and I was turned down by a lot of women like that.
Of course.
That's what you want to do. You want to get out of the room as soon as possible so you can bend over and silently scream into the Thames.
Yeah.
Regardless, you don't care if anyone breaks into your house. Your life is over because the love of your life just realized something about you and they hate you now.
The love of the life, it's his best mate's 18-year-old wife. But he decides to zip up his jumper, which only has a zipper from basically his chest to things. It's only
now that's another thing watching this movie with the benefit of hindsight.
Yes.
The early 2000s fashion is terrible.
Yeah,
my, like you said, the quarter zip.
And
it's got those big coloured
and
frames.
He decides to storm off and go for a big old storm off walk. And hopefully he's got a key because Keira Knightley's going to have to let herself out. And but then he decides to walk off to the music of Dido.
Now, you reckon that song doesn't fit there?
Sticks out like a thumb.
I think it works.
Really?
I do think it works.
I disagree.
Well,
it's that.
I've watched it more than you, so I'm right.
Potentially. And what I am. Do 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 do. It just doesn't. Everything is orchestral in this film, and then there has this very, very clear pop song from the time.
I think as far as pop songs, it's fairly orchestral though.
Symphonic
in the slightest. If we, clarify it as a pop song.
Yes. Before we jump straight into the American visit, of course, we have to just remind everyone that Alan Rickman is also trying to now entertain, but also slightly avoid in a very sort of sheepish way, also trying to sleep with the woman bringing him tea.
While his wife is in the room at the same venue. Which, in another tenuous kind of character connection, the guy from The Walking Dead is apparently the curator of that gallery.
Yeah, it's true. Now, it also, not only is she the secretary tea lady and desperately cracking on in some sort of very, very outlandish ways.
I think again it's Richard Curtis saying that continental European women are hussies.
Yes.
Again, we've established that he's racist against non-British Europeans.
Yes.
So I think that might be it. He's saying, you German women, you're all easy.
And we have the woman basically flat out saying, be with me now and always. Leave your wife, who's just over there in the corner of the room.
He's left her on her own too.
Yes.
She's over there on her own so he can work the room and dance. And he's still just hoeing in.
Yeah. Once we've established, we've got all of the men receiving tea from all of the women, all of which they want to sleep with. And to add a bit of character development, because I'm sure Richard Curtis at this point in the movie was like, hang on a second, I better put a bit of something in this story that's not just, I want to shtup my secretary. And that is that the Billy Bob Thornton arrives at 10 Downing Street, and they're friends, you
Conflict
see.
and tension.
It's a friendly relationship that Hugh Grant has. And then he makes a sort of a pass at Natalie character, and then suddenly they're not friends. And then he has a press conference to literally say the words, "We're no longer friends." And that's about as much development as Hugh Grant's character gets.
I think a lifetime of following politics, you and I, Naggy, we follow it quite closely. We know what's happening in the zeitgeist of politics at any point in time. I think it's safe to say that a lot of people would say, no, a prime minister and a president, they wouldn't make global policy changes based on who they want to have sex with that week.
Yeah.
Knowing politicians, I think they do.
Of course, yeah.
Like maybe
it's all about it.
Maybe
really.
the split that's happening between Australia and China. Maybe Albo just wanted to have a crack at Xi Jinping's wife.
Well,
Xi Jinping's wife.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Have we seen her? Maybe she's quite a good tea lady.
Well, that's why they invaded China, for the tea.
Of course, that's where it all originated.
Now, how did we get onto the Chinese Communist Party and their relationships with the Australian Parliament?
All roads lead to the Chinese Communist Party.
Tibet, famously not a part of China, and I'll fight you if you think otherwise. I got the Dalai Lama on my side.
Hugh Grant's so chuffed with himself that he told the American president to fuck off that he decides to go for a bit of a dance, and that's the famous one there. He's dancing around 10 Downing Street.
I usually hate dancing scenes in movies. It's just such an easy comedy trope. They're like, make someone dance silly.
Well, speaking of easy comedy
this
tropes,
is amazing. The moves he pulls are just
Colin Firth's character, Liam, right at this very moment, of course, he was using that typewriter that you saw before, and he's got a big stack of pages that he's finished writing, and he's out there drinking tea, 3 teas at one time by the lake, and of course, what could possibly happen to that big stack of pages, Liam?
It blows away.
Blows away into the water.
Now, there's 400 mugs on the table.
Yes.
And she took the only one that was holding the paper down. And she wasn't fired?
No,
she has
apparently not.
one job. Or 2 jobs, rather. Bring the mugs, return the mugs.
Return the mugs.
And she couldn't even get that right.
Don't lose the book.
Don't lose the book.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's 3 jobs.
3 jobs.
Move mugs, change mugs. Don't ruin the book.
But this is a huge moment in this character's development because, see, Colin Firth is just slightly annoyed by this woman up until this point. But now that she chases the book into the lake and gets a kid off, he decides he wants to sleep with her.
Especially, and you can tell because they do the classic pan from the head down, the sexy body and the side. And then they zoom right in on her tramp stamp.
Yes. Yeah. I think that really sticks out that she has, a tattoo on her lower back.
Again, Richard Curtis portraying continental European women as hussies. We keep coming back to this. We need to have a chat with Richard.
So at this point, Colin Firth's like, I think I love this woman. My wife left me again 12 minutes ago, but then some other woman has taken her clothes off to try to help me, and therefore I must assume she's interested in
Well, there's
me.
that old saying, the way to a man's heart is through his belly. A way to an English man's heart is through his mug.
The only thing that really goes on in this film, other than this at this point, Liam, is 2 things. Hugh Grant fires the tea lady for absolutely no reason whatsoever given, and Liam Neeson has a very cringy Titanic thing with his son. We're watching the film.
Just to go back to Hugh Grant real quick.
Yeah.
I think Naggy, he doesn't express why he fires her because he doesn't need to.
Right.
It's called subtext.
Okay.
Justice, if you don't know, subtext is something that doesn't need to be said.
Okay.
It's given as an atmosphere, as an action, as a movement, something like that.
All that subtext, he decides to sack her for absolutely no reason. Move her on
In
or
an
something
entire
like that.
film about relationships, there is 2 minutes of subtext, and that's it.
We also find out from that party that Laura Linney now has a bit of a moment where the Carl that from that same party where Alan Rickman was dancing with the secretary, she ends up dancing with Carl,
The man she's been in love with since about half an hour after she started working there.
Two
At
words
miscellaneous business.
2 words exchanged, 1 dance. Then he's driving her home, so it's not like a drunken sort of affair. He's sober or driving drunk, one of the 2, and he decides that he's going to go back to her place, and she invites him in. But what happens, Liam?
Well, they fall in, and this is where it's interesting that Richard Curtis went with a trope from the American kind of cinema history. He's gone with the classic, this person looks ugly / normal because they're wearing glasses, and then he takes them off and he's this swarthy, beautiful Latin god.
Doesn't speak,
but he had glasses on,
Yeah,
so he was ugly.
He doesn't
and
speak.
you shouldn't like him.
Appears he doesn't speak like a lick of English outside of the very few words that he says to Laura Linney, but she still loves him. They get it. They get in the Laura Linney also
in the throes of passion. If you watch the director's cut, she removes the top.
She does. Yeah. She does, but it's interrupted, Liam, by her brother. We find out her brother, who's mentally unwell,
very mentally unwell, and it's at this point you get it's the heaviest pang of sympathy. Obviously the wife dying, you get a bit of sympathy. The mother dying, a bit of sympathy. But this one really tugs at the heartstrings.
Yeah.
She finally found her love, and yet, it's ripped out of her heart within moments.
She could have just turned the phone off for 20 minutes, possibly.
And for a situation that she's so dedicated to, she's so filled with love for her brother, and so she feels like she really has to look after him because both the parents are dead. Of course, they're orphans.
They're
orphans.
Ben is the brother who I relate to because when I'm watching this movie,
because you were incarcerated for mental illness.
Well, Ben's a bit of like he's overweight and he's sweaty and he's pale and he looks medicated, and so do I. So when I'm watching this movie, I really relate to him rather than all the beautiful people on screen.
I relate to Bill Nye's fat manager.
Ben lashes out as well, and she catches it like a ninja. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's an impressive stop. But it's kind of sad again that she's used to that relationship becoming physical so quickly that she's. Ugh.
And this
again, I've dissected this movie many times on my own at night.
This is the start of all the relationships sort of falling apart. We've got Emma Thompson, the wife of Alan Rickman, discovers that the necklace that Alan Rickman had purchased
from Rowan Atkinson.
Which
I think bears discussion.
Yeah. Well, he basically goes there to buy some So, and he says some funny lines. They have back and forth. Having very angry Alan Rickman for the very sort of like scribbly Rowan accent's very funny. And they go back and forth, and then she discovers the necklace and thinks, "Hang on a second, maybe this necklace is for me."
He's really balled out on me this year.
But
He's reached deep into the purse.
It's not for her at all. It's for his floozy at work.
This mid-European floozy.
She decides that. So she works out that it's not for her because she decides to open a present early and thinks it's the necklace because it's in a very similar sized box.
Because remember, that's the Christmas Eve present. The tradition, you get one present on Christmas Eve to open.
Yes, but in fact, it was a CD of Joni Mitchell, a singer that she mentioned once before.
Yeah, but that's what makes it especially heartbreaking because earlier on in the film, when she talks about Joni Mitchell, she said, Joni Mitchell is the woman who taught your cold English wife how to love.
Yes.
And so the woman who taught her how to love, taught her emotions through song, is the woman whose CD she receives as her heart is broken apart.
It is. And
so Joni Mitchell taught her to love, but Joni Mitchell was also a really important part of tearing that love apart.
Another allegory from Liam McNeil of how this movie is going.
This is going to go on for 2 hours, Justice. This is brilliant.
It rolls through. We've got Martin Freeman, basically still having gratuitous sex. Then we've got the devil woman putting the jewelry on.
Now that's not subtext. Having her dress up as the devil, like that's pretty obvious.
Billy Mack has now reached number one for the Christmas thing, which I wasn't realizing.
No, not yet. He was still behind number one. Because Blue had the number one.
Blue had the number one.
Yeah.
But up to the point at which I'm reading from, he's reached number one. A lot of stuff happens. Gratuitous sex. Sandwich Man goes to America.
That's what we need to circle back on as well.
This movie's so long. It has 12 plots and none of them end anywhere.
So, Naggy, you said that you associate most with the mentally ill man who's incarcerated and very sweaty.
Very sweaty,
Now,
yes.
I relate more to Colin Frizzle. Because, of course, there's that great line, Colin, you're a lonely, ugly arsehole, you must accept it.
Of course,
I felt that here in my heart.
Yeah.
But also the theme of, going abroad to find yourself a wife. I did that, Nag, as you remember.
You did, but he also
2015, before I left, I said, boys, I'm coming back with a wife. I'll see you in 3 months.
He goes over there to find love, but also just to have sex. But then he immediately finds 3 very attractive women. And then there's a 4th woman from American Pie. What's her name? Shannon, no, I can't remember.
I looked this up just the other day when I watched it.
Massive in the 2000s. Yeah. So then he's apparently having sex with 4 women. And I tell you what,
it's a bit of overkill.
There's some diminishing returns on the amount of people. It's like saying I had sex with 10 people. It's like, well, what were you doing? Like, eventually
you're in the room while 10 people were, fondling.
Logistically,
did you have sex with them?
Mechanically, eventually going to be left out of some sort of the interaction.
Oh my God! Look at all the tea on that table.
Oh.
Wow. Isn't that amazing? He said, my whole bag is full of condoms. It was full of tea bags.
So we reached towards the more Christmassy end of the thing where Billy Mack has reached number one. Martin Freeman kisses the person that he's basically been dry humping all day and shouts yippee like it was some sort of accomplishment. Colin Firth.
You haven't got a romantic bone in your body, Naggy. It was a huge achievement. Got the kiss from the love of his life on Christmas Eve.
Colin Firth has had to drop this Portugal woman off at the airport, and apparently he's pretty sad after spending about 6.5 days with her. But then he decides he needs to go to Portugal. He's heading off there now as well.
But he goes back to France. Her and her family live in France because he lands at a French airport. And you're not getting a cab from the south of France to Portugal for less than like 500 euros.
No, but I thought he drops her at the airport. They have all the atmosphere,
I think he drops her at a ferry.
Right. They have all the sort of chemistry at the moment where apparently he's going to miss her as an Uber ride. Really, they have no communication still by this point. But he lets her go.
And then he causes an accident.
And then he decides, I'm off to Portugal, France, wherever the hell they're from.
Again, it's all the same to Richard Curtis. This is continentals, man.
But now the most important thing happens in the film that everyone's a little bit about is that the...
is it Richard Curtis holds a tiny cup?
We've got the Walking Dead man.
Or is he a giant?
Walking Dead man, now that he's been found out, decides to go to Keira Knightley and his best friend's house. And have these huge cards like Bob Dylan.
That's it. I was going to ask, is it Lennon or Dylan? It's Dylan, yeah.
It was Dylan, yeah. And he decides to be like, hey, I know that I've kept this a secret for a long time. Hey, why don't you... Shh. still don't say anything and lie to your new husband to say it's Carol's. She entertains this whole process.
And not only that, the husband says, give him a quid and tell him to bugger off. And she just stays down there for 4 minutes and he doesn't say anything.
And he confesses his love via cards, and then he walks off, and then she chases him and kisses him in front of all the neighbours.
All of the community.
Be like, what's going on out there, John? Oh, it's just Keira Knightley out there snogging a bloke that's not her husband.
And who happens to be her husband's best friend.
Best friend. I've seen him. He was standing there with cards and a bloody boombox for the last 10 minutes. What if he just joined her at the door? What was his plan then? Drop everything and run?
I'd say so. It's not a great plan, because then the cards are there and he reads them and he's like, I knew he just ran that way. There's no one else here who was carrying cards. I think they might be his and I'm going to read them. I'm going to see what they say.
He has to go home with the train, I guess. Like, apparently everyone lives 5 minutes walk from each other.
That's the other thing. Watching this movie, I didn't know people actually lived in London.
Yeah, apparently.
Like, it's a big city full of Downing streets and banks, but I didn't know people lived there.
All in very, very delicious flats as well. Like, none of them just in this like tiny sort of crowded stuff.
And no one knows what these people do for work. They're just random business people and they can afford, 3-bedroom townhouses in the middle of London.
Billy Mack, once he's reached number one, he immediately gets a call from Elton John, Liam. Because Elton John is the king of partying and success. And he says, Elton, I'll come round. But instead decides to go round to his fat manager's house and they have this platonic sort of interaction about how they actually love each other.
Now, this to me is the most beautiful scene in the whole film. Now, you know that I love my mates. I love you. I love you guys behind the camera. I'm very, very big on loving my mates.
Yes.
And so if I leave Elton John's party and go to my manager, who I've spent decades of my life with, I'm going to tell him it's Christmas Eve and I love you. I've enjoyed my whole life with you. And then he says something along the way like, boy, didn't we have some fun along the way.
And then he says, let's get pissed and watch porn, which I think is so wonderful.
It's just the most beautiful love story.
It is honest.
Is this pair here.
It is honest. Now, Hugh Grant receives a card from the woman that he just sacked and decides, hang on a second, I'm going to go find her. No address. No phone number.
He has a general idea, though, because he knows she lives in Wandsworth, but at the shitty end, and he knows which end that is. So he kind of has it narrowed down to a small radius of 100 houses.
So he goes door to door, and then finds the family in which she lives with, and then
how's the audacity of her dad calling her Plumpy?
They fat shame her.
That's so rude.
Almost endlessly.
They do, yeah. Thighs the size of tree trunks.
Yes,
is a quote that was used.
Yes. Yeah, and so Hugh Grant also doesn't ever say like, I don't think that's correct or anything like that with the family.
He just kind of awkwardly goes,
They decide to go to the school, Liam. The school is the same place that Emma Thompson and Alan Rickman's children are performing. But don't worry, that was her school and she can hide him. Stay in the car. I don't know. Do anything else besides entering the school.
That's it. Her great hiding spot was the back of a stage during a musical. Yeah. Notably, events that are focused on the stage.
Now this...
I wouldn't take someone backstage if I was trying to hide them from the stage. Yeah. It's not very far.
Now, this school has two types of presentation. One, incredibly shit, which is just kids in costumes, octopuses at the nativity play.
Yep, there's a kid in Spider-Man face paint.
And then the second one happens to be the best performance of any children and / teachers, adults ever, which is All I Want Is Christmas Is You, from a 9-year-old girl who sings it, as good as Mariah
And we
Carey.
haven't even discussed how quickly that young boy learned the drums.
We didn't,
That's what love will do. You can accelerate yourself from 4 years of drum training.
Yes, if
you're in
love. If you're in love.
And he made the band and everything.
But it's also shown that once it was discovered that Hugh Grant has been smooching with this woman in the background, that after the show of the American girl and the boy playing the drums, that she is going to America forever immediately after the show on Christmas Eve.
And I assume he knew that.
Yeah.
The boy knew.
Immediately.
That's why he had to get his kiss in that night.
But if you're going across the other side of the globe, bags packed, would have to be ready to go, and you're just getting a cab
straight from the show.
Those school performances always go long. I wouldn't be trusting them. And she has to perform.
Trying to get out, of the car park when all the kids' parents are leaving, everyone's out. You're not getting to your bloody parking spot in Heathrow in less than 4 hours.
But Liam Neeson and his son decide to also go to the airport, run there, drive there, try to get there, and then it's too late. She's already gone past security. But is that what the advice that Liam Neeson gives to his stepson? He says, no. Fuck security, runs straight past them in a post-9/11 world where they, quite frankly, could gun you down.
He would have ended up with 11 warning shots in his back.
Yes.
That's what would have happened in this post-9/11 world. And they just don't address it. They bring up 9/11 at the start and then act like it didn't even happen at the end.
They chase him. We're going to get him, and he just sprints off.
Also, I would love to know why they hired security people who couldn't catch a 10-year-old. These people are protecting their borders.
They also, when they catch up to him and he's chatting to the girl, they're like,
That's the jack.
they get a little, he gets a little moment. He's like, I have to go. And then it's I think, surely that's bad advice for a kid to run through the airport security.
One of the most heavily policed places in the country.
So we have Colin Firth finally storming back through the town, which I thought was Portugal, but you're telling me it's France.
Yeah.
Again, as the town sort of gathers around them, and they're all marching towards there. It turns out she's been learning English, he's been learning Portuguese. How long? For the last 2.5 days, apparently. They've been separate. And then it's this big sort of apport. Again, a lot of fat shaming to either her or her sister.
No, the sister, the dad refers to her as Miss Dunkin' Donuts 2003. More fat shaming. I think Richard Curtis might hate women.
I think so. I think
he hates women. He hates Europeans. He's a man full of hate, Richard Curtis.
Now we come in full circle and we end up back at the airport after this very, very happy ending. Everyone's smooching. Everyone's happy. Apparently everyone... Alan Rickman.
Oh, fuck. Rick Snape.
Rick
Snape. And Severus Snape, played by Alan Rickman.
Everyone comes back on the airport, and then there's a bit of, except for Emma Thompson, who gives him a bit of a side kiss and says, I'm fine, which is, come on, she's not fine. She's not fine at all. You've ruined Christmas, Alan. You've destroyed that relationship. But otherwise, it's all a happy ending. By God, that was a mind fuck.
I know, wasn't it wonderful? I love this movie, Jousters. I really hope you stayed on the journey with us right throughout.
Yeah.
And I hope you have as much fun rewatching it, given our insights into it and how we've probably ruined the movie for you.
It's definitely ruined it for me.
We've uncovered all the racism, sexism, misogyny,
yep.
gender power dynamics. Now you're going to watch it and you're just going to this ain't right. This film ain't right.
It's a terrible film occasionally with a Christmas
Shut
tree.
Up. It's a wonderful film.
Well, I enjoy it too. And I hope you've enjoyed this. Merry Christmas to all the Jousters out there. We'll hope to see you next season. Here's a photo of John Goodman as Santa, just to just way off. Hope you all have a very Merry Christmas, and we'll see you again in the not too distant future.
Merry Crimbans to you all.